All right, we're going to go ahead and get this meeting started. Good evening, everybody. City Clerk Reed, would you like to call the roll?
Alderman Braithwaite.
Here.
Alderman Nguyen.
Here.
Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Here.
Alderman Suffredin.
Here.
Alderman Ravel.
Here.
Alderman Rainey.
Here.
Alderman Fleming.
Here.
Alderman Fisk.
Here.
All right. Well, we have quorum and we have all of our aldermen here today. Obviously, this is a little different kind of city council meeting, so welcome to these intimate settings right here in the Aldermanic Library. Our agenda for tonight, just so everyone is aware, we'll have public comment. We will then have a discussion about the 80th City Council's planning and goal setting session, and then any other business and an adjournment. Okay, so the majority of this evening is going to be spent having a conversation about goal setting with the new City Council. Before we get to public comment, just one quick mayor's announcement. If you've always wanted the opportunity to be discovered in a movie, there is a movie going on here in Evanston. It was put out on the city's Facebook page, so you can go there. They're looking for extras all this week. A lot of the shots are on Northwestern University's campus, and so it could be your chance to be discovered. All right, with that, we will go to public comment. Did we have a sign-in tonight for public comment too? Could I get that? And if you haven't had, raise your hand if you wanted to be on the public comment, but you weren't on the sign-in, just so I know how many more. So we've got three other folks. So we'll put you down, Jean Lindwall and Kira. Okay, and remind me of your first. Carl, that's right. All right, and Carl, so with a K? With a C. All right, Carl Klein. Okay, so we've got four folks for public comment. You'll each have 3 minutes. I would ask that you respect the time of that, so we can be respectful of the other speakers as well as the aldermen and city staff that are here. So with that, because of the setting that we're in, all I'll ask is if you just stood up and project your voice. They should be able to pick this up. This meeting, even though we're in the Aldermanic Library, is being videotaped, so everyone's aware of that. All right, Mike.
Thank you. First of all, I'm very happy to see all the newly elected officials here tonight. It's my first opportunity to see and meet some of you, and I think it's wonderful. I'm glad to see it. Secondly, on the goals, I just have 2 comments. I'll keep it short. We have, there's been news of this incredible tax increase that's coming our way. I'd like to see a city goal to significantly reduce taxes and fees as opposed to going in the opposite direction. The state is considering property tax increases. I think the result of the referendum from the school system is taking effect. That's contributing to the tax increases. I'd like to see the council, and the mayor in particular, use your influence to keep some of these tax increases from occurring or reducing them. Secondly, transparency. I would like a city council goal for the city and the way our government operates to seek and become much more transparent. Some people say it's the most transparent. I'm not going to get into the details tonight, but I tend to disagree. And I'll follow up later with that, but I'd like to see greater transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was Mike Velisco?
Yes.
Okay. Vasilko, excuse me. And second speaker for public comment is going to be Jean. If you would just announce your name so the folks back at home who are watching this.
And Jean Lindwall. I'd like to ask you to be very thoughtful in establishing your priorities. You all ran on certain priorities and things you'd like to accomplish and achieve for your constituents. But don't be afraid to engage in a broader community dialogue with respect to those issues. Look to your colleagues in crafting solutions that not only work for your constituents, but other residents of Evanston. There's a lot of expertise, experience, and creative ideas out in the community, and I really encourage all of you to really reach out to the community. which hasn't always happened in the heat of discussions. And so really don't be shy about reaching out to the broader community. And also kind of a big ask is before you start engaging in a lot of brand new broad initiatives, really kind of look at the efforts that have gone in to see what's worked and what hasn't. I mean, we've got now a whole lot of experience with bike lanes of one sort or another, and new arriving shortly. We've also now got the Green Bay Ridge Emerson intersection, which I think, for those of us who use it, it's really a problematic thing. And before spending that kind of money on other kinds of major projects, we ought to really be looking at what the impact of decisions have been made. Finally, again, along the same lines of reaching out, Evanston's last comprehensive plan was adopted in 2000. And since then, we've got lots of new residents, new buildings, and lots of dramatic changes in how the local economy and the national economy, especially retail economy, really works. And I think it really is time for you and your city staff to be looking further down the road and again engaging in community dialogue about where the world is going, where Evanston's going, and what we should be striving to be 10 or 15 years from now. And looking to see how we can all contribute to getting on the same page. So those are my comments, and basically I think kind of in closing, whatever we do, we need to build sustainability, equity, and economic empowerment into those discussions with all of Evanston residents. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jean. All right, the next speaker is Carrie Kelly.
Okay. I wanted to speak today to the new council as you're planning your goals for the next session. And I also would like to call for a new plan for downtown Evanston. Really, I believe Evanstonians should have a say in how their downtown looks. There was a downtown Evanston plan in 2009 that I understand citizens really participated in, as did many stakeholders, and unfortunately that has not been followed. So it seems to just a citizen that the city's sort of just reacting to plans from developers. And it seems, as a citizen, very ad hoc. And development, sometimes we hear about 10 plus variances on heights and density and public benefits that don't necessarily sound like public benefits to what you might have in mind for something like this. And just really the size and the scale of the block-long high-rises, and they all these days seem to be the luxury micro-unit. I feel like they are wiping away our renowned character, and this is the most livable city for many of us because of that character. So I just want to call for a codified plan, again, to really be the best Evanston we can be, to be the most livable based on community input, and reflect who we are. Does our downtown look like we do? Interesting, varied, community-oriented, progressive, full of character. And I think we can do that with human scale. I've been sort of, as an amateur, looking into some new urbanism theories, and there's a lot out there that says you can have the density still that we're looking for in the transit-oriented development, but you can do it in human scale and still have varied heights and structures, and that we can create a vibrant downtown that people really want to come to. Like, think of Southport. I went to my old neighborhood and it was just hopping, it was just so interesting. I was looking at the human scale of it, and just people basking in the sun and, just kind of spending time and money there. And I think we want to be more like that rather than just a wall of high rises like a financial district or something. And then also the affordable housing. Today, Evanston needs affordable housing, but I just wonder if letting developers pay into a housing fund is really the right way to address this issue. I mean, certainly they should, but is this, when I look at the prices of the new Emerson building, $1,800 for a one-bedroom, 525 square feet, and the new Centrum at 1590 Elmwood, up to $2,500 for a one-bedroom micro unit. Some theories out there say that this is actually increasing the rental market for us all. And I know we got, for instance, $2.4 million from the new Emerson building, but based on I know this won't be always the case, but you guys approved $560 for 2 units of affordable housing. Well, that would only translate into 8 units of affordable housing. And at some of these meetings I've attended, I've heard property owners that say, hey, I own some places that I am organically providing affordable housing to people. Help me, support me. Let's don't sell our soul to the developers that kind of are taking over everything when we have it here, help people like that. And I think that's more truly the Evanston way.
Can you wrap up in about 15 seconds?
Okay, I just wanted to point out that the Red Hot Market of Logan Square actually is downsizing a stretch of Milwaukee Avenue. They've just added 1,500 apartment units, but they say that they just have listened to their constituents and they are just taking a step back from, looking at that versus what the community really needs. So I just want to make sure we are doing the same and not just using affordable housing as a smokescreen for development. Let's really look at the issue and what's right for Evanston and make sure that intertwining it with these development funds is really the way to go.
Thank you,
Okay,
Kira.
thanks.
Good. All right, and last public speakers, Carl Klein.
All right, I have it typed up to be brief. So good evening. Welcome to all the new aldermen, and welcome back to as a lifelong Third Ward resident and preservationist, I love Evanston, and I constantly share this community and city with everyone that I can, and how wonderful this is. The architecture and parks are what help make it a unique community. I'm a supporter of smart development and architecture that maintains the integrity of the community. Development cannot sacrifice the qualities that already make our city special. We should welcome development that preserves the character of the neighborhood and includes setbacks. There should be more green space. Also, let's promote walkability. I mean, this is the correct approach. Evanstonians should have a say in how their downtown and other neighborhoods should look. We cannot let the developers dictate how the downtown should be. It is good to hear that several aldermen, and potentially you, the mayor, are open to a new city plan with citizen input. Now is that time for the city to create a comprehensive city plan with citizen input. I have heard aldermen speak about the need to reform the zoning. I suggest the city use form-based code. Human scale density helps create and increase vitality and livability. Think about the successful business districts on Central Street, Noyes Street, and Main Street. Let's apply these best practices from these business districts to business districts throughout the whole city in the 5th Ward, 2nd, 8th, 9th, not just in the 3rd, 1st, and 4th. And ultimately, like I said, there should be a review of the 2009 city plan and include zoning and planning. And if your goal is truly to make Evanston the most livable city, then we need a new city plan, which includes the citizens of Evanston in the decision making. And to wrap up, historic preservation and smart development can be a powerful economic engine which has cultural, educational, environmental, and social benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. And thank you, everybody that came for public comment. And we look forward to your future thoughts. So thank you. Next on our agenda is the primary focus of today, again, is a conversation about planning and goal setting. And we have a consultant, Jean Bonander, who is here to facilitate our conversation tonight. And I know Jean will probably give a little of her background as she's worked with this council before. So I'll turn it over to you, Jean.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And it's a pleasure to see many of you again, and a pleasure to see those of you for the first time. It's Evanston. One of the reasons I come to help facilitate here is because I enjoy the conversation so much, and the fact that Evanston's elected officials are so focused on this community and making it the best it can be. It's just a pleasure to hear your voices, to watch you share information. And tonight's meeting has two components to it. The first is communications. One is that you're a group of 10 people who will need to work together very successfully over the next 4 years to accomplish some of the things that you have told me about individually and that you heard tonight among your constituents here who came to the meeting. So you have choices about how you can communicate with each other and how you get to where you're going to go. So the first part of the meeting is a reflection on what you told me about how you best communicate, how you want to communicate with the others in the room, and generally with ripple effect to the citizenry beyond. And then the second part is getting into the goal setting. To move forward in the city and to take advantage of the time that you have to work together, you can just do the work that comes before you at the council meetings, which can be all-consuming, there's no doubt. But on the other hand, if you're going to move in directions where you think the city needs to go beyond today, the current events, then you're going to need to lay out a strategy, a plan, and choose your directions in areas where you know you can succeed. You can't do everything. So as much as it might feel like the community wants you to move forward on several different fronts, you all are individuals who have lives beyond serving on the city council, and you have commitments to the routine activities of the city that also occupy your time. So you've got to carve out some time here to work on where you're going for the next 4 years. So that's the second component of what we're going to talk about. The first part on the communication side, I have a lot of slides and I'm going to go through them quickly. I'm leaving the entire set with you, so if any of this is something that you want to reflect on, you're more than welcome to. But this is a group that communicated well with me, and I think that you're going to communicate and collaborate well as a collective group. You will have conflicts. And so part of what we talk about in this information is how you resolve those, how you get beyond them, how you build your skills so that you can get the things done that you want to get done. So it's communications and plan steps, and I'll try and stay out of everyone's way. These generally were the trends that I identified in the conversation. I sent out a questionnaire. About half the council was able to reply and respond, and there was a lot of consistency in the information. And I expect that you may add to this as well, and I'll keep track of that. But you told me that sharing information in positive ways builds collaboration. You told me that some words, terms, and phrases do block effective communication. That progress and humor make things go better. That you want to learn from each other. That you want to help each other understand issues and avoid mistakes. And you want to accomplish things. You want to complete products. When fiscal hardship arises, and it will, you want to find common ground quickly and act equitably. Fairness and equity are the cornerstone of Evanston values, and these need to be clearly defined so that you can craft your goals and objectives and your programs going forward in ways where everyone on the council knows that that's what that word or that term means. And then profound societal changes will affect this community and all communities, all people in the United States and the globe. And you want to understand what those possibilities and probabilities are. So the first question I asked was, how do you best communicate with your colleagues when it's not face-to-face? And you have choices, primarily phone calls, emails, and texts. And you talked about how you use both. Email can be sent any time of the day and provides a trail. But emails and text are primarily transactional. So it's not something where you have a serious in-depth conversation. And the phone provides the opportunity to do that. And it helps when delivery and content are important. Now, one thing that it's not up here that I will comment on is your open meeting laws provide you a framework on how you use your electronic media and whether or not you're having serial meetings and who you're, whether or not you're making decisions with this information outside of a public meeting context. So it's really important to pay attention to, the various elements of email, for instance. It's so easy to send it beyond where you wanted it to go in the first place. And so that's why so many people just focus it on transactional matters or exchanging brief pieces of information. The next question I asked is, what are the one or two phrases or words you prefer not to hear? And there are many more than this that people consider to be inflammatory. You were all very polite. But a lot of them have a negative context and or appear to have a negative context. And so it's talking about what you can't do rather than what you can do. And so these phrases are challenging. Why? A lot of them are exclusionary. They identify problems, but they don't solve problems. So they're not helpful in building your relationships or getting to solutions. Sometimes they're used as terms of avoidance to prevent meaningful conversations from happening. And a lot of them are quick and easy, and they don't reflect the complexity of the issues that you deal with in civic business. And I'm sure there are many others. Interpersonal conflicts. When you have had an interpersonal conflict, maybe not on the council, maybe in the other parts of your life, what happened? How did you resolve it? Did you survive? Mostly, you reflected that it's important to meet face to face and have a direct conversation with someone you've had a conflict with to see if you can figure out what happened, understand, and find a way to move on. And sometimes it means asking forgiveness because we all make mistakes, and a lot of interpersonal conflict is miscommunication. And so it's if I said that, it's not what I meant. that's a variation on not apologizing. But apologizing is, I said something, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. Apparently you heard it differently than what I wanted to convey. Those kinds of things. You can't do that well on a text, on an email. You can a lot of times on a phone call, but interpersonal really makes a difference. And why is this important? Everybody sees things differently. Nobody sees anything exactly the way that you do. So sharing that perspective is what gets you to the collaborative efforts that you want to go to. Sometimes the language itself is contentious. A lot of people use you language instead of I language. You caused me a problem, rather than I think we have a problem. Sometimes conflict is a purpose. Some people actively engage and enjoy conflict relationships. In my experience, it's not terribly productive to get work done, but people do it. And sometimes it's tangential. It sends you off target. It's hard work, and it's frustrating. And sometimes people get frustrated and it boils over, and that's where you have conflict. But, a group of 10, you have to figure out ways to work together in order to get anything done. And so it's important for you to identify the conflicts when they occur quickly and resolve them quickly, because they lessen the impact. I asked what makes council members happy and what makes them laugh. And a lot of what you do is very serious business, and sometimes it's easy to wallow in the details of it. So what makes you happy? And you kind of broke it out into the personal and the professional. On the personal side, things like physical activity and engaging with a puppy. And on the work-related side, it's succeeding, making progress, being honest in your efforts with your other colleagues. Why is this important? Because positive outcomes are good. They make you feel good. They make the community feel good. And when positive things happen, people say and do things that shape lives. They're inspiring and joy-inducing. And excuse me. Laughter's healthy. Makes you feel good. It balances all the other stuff. And you broke it out between family and work. I asked the council to describe a couple of attributes that help you build trust and respect. Excuse me. So listed up here, it's basic stuff. It's what do? You listen, you do your homework, you explain yourself, you're thankful, you're loyal, you're helpful to others. Why are these important? Because these behaviors earn the credibility and collegiality of your colleagues. And it's easier to forgive mistakes if someone you trust or respect is trying to make it right. Genuine disagreements can be heard, understood, learned from. And you can, within this group, you can expand into the community and other relationships to talk about who do you trust? Who do you trust on this topic? Can you share that person's information with me? Trust and respect are building blocks, and loss of trust and respect, when that happens, is not easily recovered. I asked the council also to talk about ward and city. 9 of you are elected to represent your ward as well as the city of Evanston and the mayor at large. So how do you do this? And one of the things that I heard was it's important for the city to have a clear set of overall priorities, like your plans. So you know where the work that you're doing in the ward fits in with the overall city. And each of the wards are different, and each is important. What's going on in each one of the wards contributes to the whole. So it's important for to understand the overall interests and that you're acting in support of both. The interests are the same, but each ward has unique attributes that they can offer, making this whole city knit together. Why? The residents want to know that they're represented on both levels. They live in the city of Evanston, they live in the ward. They want to know that what happens in one ward affects another, and that's a good thing. And they want every part of this community to be valued, understood, and heard on issues of concern. And that's what you reflected to me. Broadly, you want both the benefits of ward strength and community strength. What do you know that the others on the council might like to know about you? What can you do to help each other grow and develop and be a strong council? Some of you know how to balance civic work and personal life after serving on the council. That you hear different voices from your neighborhoods and your wards. You have tenure and you'd like to help. And some of you have specialty topics like environmental issues, economic development, disaster recovery that you could share with the colleagues in the city. And it gives you an opportunity to assess alternatives and options. So why do you want to do this? You want to help each other be effective, which is a very admirable process. You want to find common ground and ways to collaborate. You want to thoughtfully share what you know with each other. You want to build on knowledge and experience. You want a coalition build for Evanston's residents, businesses, and programs. And you need to recognize, and you also do recognize, that it's important to know what's in Evanston's control and what is not, and plan accordingly. Fiscal hardship will come, and you have particularly unique challenges here in Illinois right now. So when that comes, having a unified approach to how you're going to address fiscal issues is going to be an important aspect of the council's function for the next couple of years. Most of you did not want to start off cutting anything, and which is appropriate. You get elected to do things, not to get rid of things. And so you want to increase revenue as best you can without increasing taxes and fees. You're looking to innovation to create cost efficiency. And if necessary, sacrifices should be shared among as many departments and programs as appropriate. You recognize that past practices may not represent the challenges that you're going to face today, and your priorities are going to have to evolve. So some of you were very concerned about getting into the weeds on this quite yet without knowing all the things that might be coming at you. There was an interest in making sure that services fees and equitability by ward were analyzed as you go forward if you have to do some trimming in your organization. And that includes, in any city, trimming means talking about what staffing levels are, how many people you have, and all of the concurrent activities around that with union contracts and pension obligations. So, and there was a theme that the changes, whatever changes come, should not disproportionately affect those who are already suffering as best you could, and look to long-term solutions rather than short-term patches. So, this theme throughout was why fairness and equitability. I heard this over and over from the council members. And as a civic organization, you have baseline infrastructure, services, and programs that you must maintain, either because it's what Evanston does or it may be required by other levels of government. So you need to identify those and recognize those. Again, what's in your control? And then to reach out to ask trusted resources, citizens for assistance, ideas, possible strategies. You might want to look to see if there are some things you could stop doing. This is a hard exercise. That maybe there are other things that you should do instead. So how do you go about that? How do you figure out what to look for? And then look at the city's money and assets and see if you can make those elements of your infrastructure and asset value work in different ways. Can city sites be redeveloped? Can public-private partnerships occur? Those kinds of things. And I suspect you're doing a lot of that already. The next question I asked was to briefly define equity. That's kind of an oxymoron, but equity is an important term because it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And to achieve equity in all of its dimensions, you're going to have to come to some agreement on what it means. So fairness, no barriers to opportunity, equal access to community facilities, provide people what they need to be successful, a level playing field, opportunities and success when equivalent effort is expended. Why do you want to do this? First, the common definition, and then community support for the things that you're going to have to do in the future are more likely to occur if people feel like your actions are fair and equitable and well understood. This willingness to hear and act upon real and perceived inequity builds trust for your civic organizations and structures. And the ability to be consistency and accuracy in delivery of accurate and reliable information will also build support in good times and during the challenges. So it gives you an opportunity, the sense of equity, whatever that means to you, defined, if you can come to some sort of common agreement on it, just increases the depth and breadth of the base of this community. Possible profound impacts. What cultural, societal, technological impacts could be coming in the next 5 years? I think that's a relatively short time frame. I think a lot will happen in 5 years. So what are some of the things that could affect this community? Driverless cars, the desire among your citizenry for experiences rather than acquisition, inequality, once again, race relations, socioeconomic gaps, technology-related, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, medical advancements. What do you do with big data, all that data that's out there? How can you best use it? Can the city get freely accessible Wi-Fi? One of the challenges is the disconnect between local government and other levels of government. This is throughout the nation. The feds and the state do things to local government that you can't control, and they frequently have an unpleasant effect. And then using social media, the connectedness has some wonderful benefits, but without the critical thinking that goes along with the use of social media, and by critical thinking I mean everything from looking at whether it's true or not, whether it's opinion or fact, whether or not you're looking at this when you shouldn't be stepping off a curve into traffic. How does all of that fit? And these are the social media component, the interconnectivity component, the easy access to vast amounts of information, entertainment, and the consumption of it, even perhaps rather than the creation of it, are big challenges upcoming. So I want to close this section with just a few tools that struck when we were having these conversations, some ways to continue to communicate well, to collaborate, to find your collective path as you have decisions to make. Ask questions of each other to the extent that you can be clarifying and informative. Assume that your colleagues have good intentions. Use I language. I feel this way about this, or I need this information, not you need to deliver it to me, once again. Tone and expression is as meaningful as content, especially in face-to-face. The options and alternatives. Act with speed and intention, if you can. Sometimes you're forced to because of deadlines. You're not ever going to have all the information about an issue before you have to make a decision. So, to the best you can, act with speed and intention. Acknowledge mistakes, ask for forgiveness. Allow as many people as possible to take credit and to be honored for productive decision making. Think conceptually in terms of yes and rather than no but. Common courtesy is important. And acknowledging hearing comment and acknowledging disagreement without rancor to the best of your ability. I saw no evidence in my conversations with you and in the answers to these questions that you had any intention to do otherwise. So this is a reflection back at you of what I heard from you. I see no reason why this group cannot move forward, collaborate, find really productive ways to take actions on goals, objectives, plans coming up in the next 4 years. And with that, with my broken voice, I'd be happy to answer any questions, hear any comments, and I'll try and keep track of them here.
I guess my comment is I think it's pretty positive, right? What you went through. I mean, you talked to everybody. Half the people or more, submitted answers to your questions, and I think there's a lot of commonality amongst what people said. And I particularly like the part about everyone assuming that everyone has the best intentions at heart, right? The whole thing about the Athenian oath and all that, which I really believe is true. When there is a difference of opinion on issues and stuff, I think everybody's coming to it from a good place, and it was good to see that come out.
And just to I think it's good that we're doing this on the front end. When we had this exercise before, we had a group, but collectively as a group, some bad habits got developed over a period of time, so it was sort of an issue to overcome some of the bad habits that we had, and I think it's useful to think about these things from the beginning before we develop bad habits. So we all do that, so good timing on it.
Why are you laughing?
She's never met a council that's so quiet.
Well, this is, you're sticking to the communication part now.
Yes, I am. And so
we'll have more thoughts on the other parts.
I'm sure you will. Yeah, the communications part, you're right. It is positive. And what I heard from you was positive, that you're looking forward to working together. And it's not that things won't happen. And Alderman Wilson is absolutely correct. There are councils that work well together, and there are councils that don't. And once you get into the don't habits, the not working well habits, they can really affect your ability to trust and like and respect each other's opinions and knowledge, and to get to the solutions where you want to go. You've got big things to do here, and the vast majority of your time is going to be taken up in the routine activities of governance. And governance is hard work, but it's now work. It's not future work. It's not laying the framework for the big things that you're going to want to do. Many of you just came off campaigns, and so you talked about the things that you wanted to do for this community. And now that you're here, now that you're getting ready to govern, in part it's the recognition that you can't do it by yourself. You have to do it with several other people at this table. And hopefully for most of the important decisions that Evanston makes, it will be well over a majority of you, but more of a collaborative group of the whole moving forward. So you will have your disagreements, and you will have split votes, but it's how you do it and how you move forward. And there's one thing that I put on the things that phrases that really bug me, and this comes out of my experience with local government, which is "I told you so." And it was so painful when I heard council members say, "You made a mistake, and I told you so. I told you it wasn't going to work." And that's not good stuff. That's not good stuff. We all make mistakes. We all wish we could go back and fix the past on occasion, and it doesn't work. So you have the future to work with. You have now and the future. And this is your opportunity, and I think you're going to do really well.
And one thing, so now I've been doing this for a little while, and this is, I guess, more directed to the new council members, you'll get mad at each other. And it's okay that you get upset with each other, because that's part of the process. To your point and some of the questions you asked us, it's how do you regroup when there is something that you don't agree on? Because, and I shared with some people, in my own house, I'm lucky if I'm, in 75% agreement with my spouse, and that's doing pretty well. So, you're going to come to a context like this, and you're not always going to be in agreement, but it's what you do to get past the disagreement points. And again, it's legitimate to be upset with somebody. It's legitimate to get angry with them, but it's, respectful communication, and it's working through it and, getting to the next thing. Because, it's easy to get caught up in the disappointment instead of focusing on where you need to be going with the next item.
The only thing I'd add to that, Don, and I haven't been on council more than 6 weeks, right? So I can't speak to that, but just from my experience, I think that, if you always operate with integrity and, you're straightforward in what you think, those conflicts or disagreements that you have aren't as bad because people, I think, appreciate candor and being straightforward. I think when the conflicts get really bad is when people's word isn't their word, or when, people have a hard time articulating, why they're arriving at a certain position, and then people become suspicious and everything. So I've just always found that, you operate with integrity, which for me means I'll tell you my opinion, but if I don't have an opinion, I'll say I don't have an opinion. I don't know. I haven't thought enough about this issue. And that's always served me well.
I think one of the important points that one of the aldermen made was, I'm going to change my mind on occasion too. I will have gone a direction, I'm going to change my mind. And when I do that, I'll try and let you know in advance, and I'll try and explain it so that you don't feel blindsided as others in the room. And again, that goes back to the trust and respect. You need your colleagues to help you do the work that you've signed up to do. And so things happen, things change your opinion, new knowledge comes in, and go different directions. It's okay, but say so. Don't leave your colleagues in the dark when it might be information they need to know as well. All right, you are all super communicators. And you're a little pizzaed out, I could tell. Are you ready to go on to the next part, or do you need to take a break?
What is the next part?
About the issues, goal setting, I think.
Okay, you have
There's two things.
you have next steps in your goal setting and planning. And in our conversations, many of you talked about wanting to revisit some of the current plans and activities. And for many of you, affordability and affordable housing was on your mind. And so generally when you go through, start to do a planning process that gets you out of the routine day-to-day stuff, you review your past practice. It doesn't mean you're wedded to it, but you do take a look at it because this is the foundation from which you're operating now. So look at your mission statement, look at your vision statement, review your goals and objectives. You have 7 of them, and they're posted frequently and well throughout this building and hopefully in the community. You do have to consider that balance between your ongoing work and the time that's needed to devote to planning and evaluating the directions that you want to go forward. And so you've got to design, you've got to host meetings, invite the community members and experts if you're going to move forward with the planning process. This is the reason I bring this up is because one of the big adjustments when you join a council is the work and time commitment involved in being an alderman and being the mayor. It's a new level of activity that's added to what for most of you is already a very full plate. So carving out the time for how you're going to do a planning process, which is generally lengthy, even extraordinarily so when it comes to things like strategy planning, strategic foresight planning, can be an immense undertaking for you and your staff. So you need to be cognizant of the time and the effort and the background information that you're going to want to bring to that kind of a process. It's very different from the transactional work of approving contracts and looking at the rules and regulations that you have to deal with, even from the traditional land use and zoning processes. that structure is already in place. You may have choices and options, but the structure is there. In these kinds of settings, you get to design your structure. So, and then ultimately you have to consider what your preferred and desired outcomes will be, and then action steps and timelines. So, as intensive as the planning process is, then there's more after that. Then you actually have to do what you said you were going to do, or to the best of your ability, attempt to do so. So then you have to adopt it, what are the challenges, and then implement. So this is where I hope you will spend your time and I will hear your voices, is what do you want to do? What kind of plan? What framework do you want to use? And what topics do you want to cover? You have existing plans, and there's a list of them on the next slide. Do you want to use those as a foundation for the things that you want to do? Or is there a specific topic like affordable housing and the financial considerations? Nobody likes to talk about what's going to happen with the state of Illinois and what its impact is going to be on you. But I would suggest that you do the best you can to lay a framework about how you might want to approach that. You know it's coming. You don't quite know what it is, but how you want to approach it, what criteria you're going to use to evaluate changes to your financial condition, helps your staff and helps you and helps the community understand what hard choices you had to make in order to keep the city intact and keep the essential services and the prioritized or preferred services available to your community. So these are your some of the existing plans, and I think Wally sent them out to you, sent them to me, and I'm sure you know them better than I do. I scanned them all, especially the 143-page downtown plan. So, but you last did strategic planning in 2006. The downtown plan looks like it was adopted in 2009. You have a park scorecard, and that was very interesting and informative, that came out in 2016. And your livability plan, also, what makes Evanston livable? You want to be the most livable community in the nation. Some elements of that were defined in that plan, and that was a very positive plan. So those are some bases there. Are there others that we've missed?
Lakefront Master Plan.
Pardon?
The Lakefront Master Plan.
Okay.
What year was that, Judy? On the Alderman Fisk.
Wow. Yeah, 2000.
Like 8 or 9.
I think it was 8.
January 2008.
Thank you, Wally.
What is it, the West End plan?
2007.
Yeah.
West End Master Plan also.
West End Master Plan?
Yeah.
2000 for the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
For the West End, I think it was 2007.
2007?
Right.
Century Street here.
Central Street Corridor Plan. I don't know what that is.
Could you say that again?
Central Street Corridor Plan.
Which street?
Central Street.
Got it.
I bring that up in the communications part. June of 2007.
Okay, and that's a corridor plan, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the comprehensive general plan. Is that 2000?
Yes.
Jeez.
Yes. Now with the general plan, are you under state mandate to do that periodically? Is that something?
No.
Just like right now.
Okay, okay.
It's like every other year, right?
Yeah,
Seems like every other year.
every other year, yes. So, these are in addition to the ones that are up on the screen, and and these seem to be more focused, except for this one, of course, on particular parts of of this community. Other than the downtown, which encompasses certain wards, but it is the downtown of the entire community. So I would consider that a broader plan as well. Are you using them? Are they working? The plans?
Sometimes.
All right. And
It
so,
doesn't seem that any of them have been mostly used. Seems like they get abandoned at some point, from a very limited perspective.
got it. So what I'm hearing you say is the plans are done, they're created, some elements of them are in force and in use, but others are not, and is there, how do we know why? What's working, what isn't?
I think a number of them have been, they haven't just been written. I think they have been used. The Lakefront Master Plan has, Central Street Corridor Plan has. The Comprehensive General Plan is very general, so it's cited by people all the time, but it certainly could be rewritten. I do think the Strategic Plan has been followed, and the Livability Plan is definitely being followed. This Park Scorecard is so new that we haven't really had an opportunity to plan around that. So I think, for the most part, I think they don't just sit on a shelf.
Well, and the livability plan is actually a very, has a deadline. It has an greenhouse gas emissions goal for 2016, and we're about to find out what our results were for 2016, and it's time to develop the next climate action plan. So, and that there will be community groups that will help do that.
I think part of the problem sometimes is that we ask the public to be involved in both the discussion and the writing of the master plans, and they remember that. So they remember that, and sometimes we don't. So they're always a good reminder to us to go back and, the downtown plan obviously is something that we never codified. Lakefront master plan is also something that we never codified. Central Street we did. And the comprehensive general plan, that shows up in references to our plan commission and other commissions when some of our standards for approval are based on that plan. And I don't think we really either understand that or pay close enough attention to it that it has implications beyond just the document itself.
What about the West End Master Plan?
I think a lot of them, first of all, it's 10 years old, and in the West End Master Plan, there were two real aggressive goals, and one of them involved the waste transfer station no longer being able to operate. And so I think that plays a major role, and then the other thing that you have to tackle is the marketplace dictates. It's great to have a sketch, but if it's not supported by what's going on in the current market.
Okay. Yeah, one of the interesting things to me was 2008, 2006, prior to the recession, and that changed so much about what happened in civic life everywhere. And so the question is, what does it mean, and what do you want to do about it? As long as I won't take your feet off the wall. Okay. So, among the things that you mentioned to me in the conversations were affordable housing. And there's, I will tell you that from my perspective, there was a little bit of situational bias there because I spoke with many of you after a decision that you had made that involved 2 units of affordable housing at a council meeting under which you were at a deadline. And some of you expressed some concern and frustration about how do we do a better job of this in the future? How do we understand our housing needs, what's affordable, what's not. How do we leverage our resources? How do we make the best use of the assets that we have to figure out how we can tie in affordable housing? And many of you tied it to the equity issues. How do we make this community more equitable when housing is a challenge for so many people? So just some questions to think about. Do you have any existing structure that you want to use within the council or the community to help frame this?
The Human Services Committee.
And if not, should the council consider forming a subcommittee? And broader than that, when to ask the community for help with this issue? And then on the finance budget planning issues, is there existing council subcommittee or not? I wasn't sure. I just put that up. If you do have one, use one. Do you need to form a new?
We had a budget subcommittee a long time ago.
Oh, a budget. Yeah. And then, again, when to ask the community for help. So these would be, if these concepts are of interest to you, this would be in addition to the 4 plans that were up there previously and these existing plans here. And then plan components. You need to set the participants. If council members are going to start the framing process, then how many of you and how would it be distributed? And if there are non-council participants, again, the timing and selection process is frequently notable. Do you want to advertise for people who might be interested? Are you going to select people? I don't know what your traditions are, or if you want to create new traditions, you're welcome to do so. So, yes.
Jean, I know that we have never actually discussed what the role of municipal government or Evanston's government is in providing for affordable housing. We know how the federal government defines their role in affordable housing by subsidies and grants, etc. The state has IDA and different programs like that. But the city really never, and the county, distributes a subsidy, mostly, I believe, provided with money from the feds. Yeah. But the city has never really identified its role in affordable housing. We talk a whole lot about it and how important it is that we do it, whatever doing means. But we've ordered developers to provide money for it or set aside units for it, but that's not us. I mean, we're not doing it. We're just telling other people to do it. So I think we should just figure out what it is our role is in affordable housing.
And I guess into that question, I feel like we approach affordable housing like we do social services. We rely a lot on our not-for-profit community, and I realize with some of our children, a lot of them have closed shop just due to the recession.
Well, not-for-profits go to the federal government, the state government, right, county government. That has nothing to do with us. I mean, we might write a letter of reference for them or something, right, or we might go to their fundraiser and give them a $100, $200 check, but that has nothing to do with the function of municipal government providing for affordable housing. Right. So I'm just talking about the narrowly defined role of municipal government.
I've never been clear on the council what each of us means by affordable housing.
You think it is clear?
No, I don't think it is clear.
No, that's what I would like.
And I think that's one of the first discussions to have is what does that mean to each of us? Because if you
in the community too.
Well, if you look at going back to what Ms. Kelly said, I thought was interesting because it's sort of like the comprehensive general plan. If you think of an Excel spreadsheet, if you if you change one number on Excel spreadsheet, then it all rolls down and all the other numbers change. That's the way affordable housing basically works. When we make a decision on a development project on the basis of affordable housing money and that changes the project, as it must, then what does that mean? Is that an intended response? Is that something we should think about? How is the affordable housing money spent? Who are we looking at? Is it, across all wards? And I don't think we've ever done that.
I've brought this up many times, and we see on the bills list, affordable housing fund money is paying to, and you can justify this. Affordable housing money is being used to pay for housing counseling for people who are tenants who are having problems with their landlord. Affordable housing money is being paid to send, the handyman to keep. I don't think it's being used for that anymore. Maybe it is now. But it's being used to pay for all sorts of things that it might be helping people stay in affordable. Exactly. But we've never really defined how that. Right. We've never done it. Maybe our staff has done it, but we haven't done it. And we've never talked about what our role is in affordable. Right. No, I absolutely agree. I agree. And also, a lot of things that have been going on lately in our community really flies in the face of providing for affordable housing. Mm-hmm. The referendum that was just passed that I'm not going to say, I can't speak for everybody, but I certainly did support it. $400 and some odd a year added to everybody's, that's the most regressive thing that anybody could have done. That flies in the face of affordable housing. This whole thing with the beverage tax that the county put, that flies in the face. Talking about downsizing buildings and, we don't like tall buildings, we don't want to do this, we have to really think of the things, the decisions we make. So we got to really zero in. We don't want this, we don't want this, we don't want to add a tax to this, it all takes, we've got to look at it. It's a big picture issue. Right. But then it also depends on what do we mean by affordable housing.
Exactly.
I don't think you can move forward on this until you have that discussion. One of the aldermen in the conversations made a comment about there's affordable housing and then there's affordability in general, and the regressive tax is one component of affordability. If everyone pays an equal flat tax, but it has a disproportionate impact on some people's income, that can affect housing. So it's the affordable housing that's a good starting point term, but you're also going to want to talk about implications beyond the housing component and what gets people into housing, what drives them out of housing. And is it some of the values that you want to attribute to housing? Do you want people who are here currently to stay? Is it okay to age in place in Evanston? You have a tremendous reputation for your school in Evanston. People come here because of the school. They stay beyond. And why do they do that? What's important about this community? The mix between rental and ownership, and some of these new concepts in housing. The tiny houses, the micro houses. This one really giant house that serves multi-generational families a benefit in your community. Housing means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and you could probably spend a whole evening on trying to lay this out and trying to come to some common ground on what affordable housing means.
And not in my backyard. We have the Peter Braithwaite issue. Really, I thought that was just so classic, so interesting.
And what does affordable housing look like too? In many communities, that's a huge concern. In some communities, housing that's affordable for people with low incomes looks very much like housing throughout the rest of the community. In other places, it does not. And what kind of community do you want to be? So we've been a bit off tangent. You haven't picked a plan to focus on for the next year or a series of plans, but on the affordable housing discussion, I don't want to lose your comment there. So is that something that you'd like to consider working on? Is what is affordable housing?
I think that drives almost everything we're talking about.
Charging these guys all this money.
So let's set that one aside for the moment. But this just lays out the strategy for once you pick whatever you plan or plans you might want to move forward with. They're just elements that you need to recognize. Time frames. What are your in-house resources that you're going to have to draw upon to help you with the planning process? Will you need outside resources? Structure of the public process elements. When do you share information in what formats? Are you going to do it at a council meeting? You're going to reach out? You're going outside of the community? And then you've got recommendations and a proposed plan to deliver. And that's the end of my slide. Yes?
Well, I think there are a couple big pieces here that all hinge on each other. Partly as Judy was saying, our strategic plan was written in 2006. The world is so different from 2006. And not just the timeline of 11 years, but the recession came through and really upended an awful lot of some of the plans that Evanston had and some of people's expectations and views of the world. So I think we definitely need to rewrite our strategic plan or have a new strategic plan. And that was a very good process that we had. Then within that, sort of underneath, this is my view, underneath that overall strategic plan, which is where are we going as a city, it's a big component is the affordable housing discussion that needs to happen because it's been so much part of what we've been doing on the council. And as Alderman Rainey said, we have money coming in and we want to figure out what's the best use for it, within defining what we all mean by affordable housing, what does the community think we mean by it, and how do we get that done. And then at the same time, we have the downtown plan, which desperately needs to be rethought out. So that's also underneath our strategic plan, and it links itself directly with the affordable housing plan. So all three of those, in my mind, need to be done right now. Not to be for all of us, but it's hard to think of doing one before another because they all hinge on each other. Obviously, we can't do them simultaneously, but they do all hinge together, and we need to do at least one of them right away.
Comprehensive strategy.
As a strategic plan. Yeah, to me, that's the one that then sets the table for everything else that comes underneath it. But then we need to move quickly into, and the discussion of affordable housing would obviously be part of our strategic plan in my mind, and also where we're going with the downtown plan, which isn't just the particular building sizes, but it's what do we need in our downtown. What do we need to keep our downtown vital? Looking ahead, what do we see? Retail is dying. So, how much will retail die back in Evanston? So what does that mean for our downtown? And experiential activities are growing. So what does that mean? And then how does that fit into our strategic plan, which includes maintaining our economic health, our financial stability, and our diversity.
Why can't the downtown plan be a part of that? Is there no way
I think
that
it
that
could be a
be-
subset of it, but the
Can it
strategic
all-
plan to me is more,
I know, but can it all just be?
well, I don't
I
see
mean,
why
wouldn't
not.
that be interesting to?
But it might be more, detailed in sort of
Yeah,
the
it
zoning
should be.
sense. But I do think there's an element of the downtown plan, which is part of the strategic plan. Like, where do we want, so much of what has defined Evanston for decades is we have a real downtown. And that's what we maintained when we
Again.
did the movie theater complex and pushed it along for, we gave it a lot of life for 20 years. Now we're at another one of these, I hate this word, inflection points. And so what's the next 20 years or 10 years? Where is that going to take us?
We told them that we would be able to go under that viaduct, didn't we? Remember? They said that the theaters would keep us from traveling under the
I know,
viaduct.
I remember that.
Could never connect Maple to Sherman.
So we just rebuilt the viaduct.
Well, one of the things I want to make sure that we do is come up with plans that the public can understand, that they can read it and they can pretty much know that we're going to be using that as the template for our decisions, and that while the plans may by necessity change, we're not going to abandon them altogether without some public discussion. Because I think it's been frustrating, and I mentioned this at council the other day about when people pick up the downtown plan, what we've basically been doing is letting the tail wag the dog and responding to development rather than being out in front of it. And I think that our community is certainly strong enough and desirable enough that we can be out in front of it. But it is frustrating to citizens to say, hey, I participated in the downtown master plan and what's happening in the downtown doesn't look anything like that. So why not? So we have to take some responsibility for that. But I absolutely agree that everything has, that things have changed so much. I'm not so discouraged by the lack of, or that traditional retail is changing. I think that's developing. A new retail is developing, and I think Target is a very good example of that. And that's something that I do think that we can be out in front of because we've got now a downtown residential community that will support that. Will support non-driving walk-to retail. Maybe it's not going to do everything for everyone, but people are going to be able to buy a pair of socks.
And underwear.
But we can be underwear always. But we can be out in front of that, and that goes along with the new thinking. We've got a lot of really cool people. Johanna is wonderful, and Annie Coakley, downtown Evanston. I mean, we've got people who are thinking about these things that I think would be really helpful to hear from. But I do think that the community generally is confused about what we're doing and how we're making decisions.
A couple of questions for you. When starting a new process for this, do you go back and see what you have in your plans currently that applies? So, number one. Number two is, let me ask you about strategic planning and the finance issue, which we've successfully avoided talking about so far, which is what happens with financial challenges coming up. Just a question for you: does it make sense to move ahead with an overall strategic plan when you don't know that piece? For you, it could be a very valid conversation, but if you've got a big chunk of change that you're going to have to take out of your financial situation in the middle of a strategic plan, does that make sense quite yet?
I think, in looking at the plans that we have in place, they tend to focus on philosophical and conceptual as far as we're going to spend this much money on X, Y, or Z. And I think that carries over into the downtown plan. So the downtown plan, for better or for worse, depending on any given person's perspective, kind of right out of the box, things weren't as they were expected to be in the plan. So And as Ms. Kelly said, it kind of put us in a position where for all of these years we're just being reactive to what comes to the plate. And I think kind of getting, doubling back and focusing on that. But despite the fact that that plan wasn't really implemented or codified with the zoning, I think that as a group we've really been working towards, and you hit on one of the, somebody must have made the comment, but it's developing an experiential kind of development instead of a material development. So I think that's kind of where a lot of the trends are going, and our staff has been really helpful in that, in helping to direct us in that. Placemaking, walkability, different modes of transportation. So, department stores are, falling apart. So we have to do something differently. We have to adapt to what it's going to be and try to be ahead of the curve on that. But I think we're trying to do that, and I think if we can kind of get these plans, most as you're saying, so that people understand what we're doing. We are doing things purposefully and with intention, but I don't think a lot of people really fully understand kind of what that, what those intentions are, because again, the piece of paper or the 160 some pages of paper don't necessarily reflect the direction that we've been trying to, move things.
You just said two different things. You just said that, as Ms. Kelly said, we just take things as they plop in front of us, and then you said we've been doing things very purposely.
Well, we've been reactive on, as far as the developments are concerned.
Oh, you don't think we've worked those until they're exactly like we like them?
I think we do. That's what I followed up and tried to explain. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend 25 minutes.
No, but I mean, we've got some really fabulous development.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
But that's my point. We've spent a lot of time, and we've been intentional in what we're doing, in putting it into that direction and in that context.
So are you saying that these developments that we have approved haven't been approved willy-nilly, that they've had a lot of citizen input into them, similar to our when we go through one of these planning processes?
I think that they didn't necessarily follow the 2009 plan. So, and of course, people have opportunities to come and comment and talk about what's going on and what we're doing. So I think for the most part, the things that we've approved have been, spent a lot of time on them, and at least in the past 8 years.
We've had almost none, though. I mean, relatively speaking, we went 5 years without anything.
Well, that's true. So it's really the past, I guess, 4 years. Yeah.
So, once again, I heard what Alderman Wilson said about your plans are philosophical and conceptual. So can you do that in an environment where things might change for you financially?
Well, can I don't agree with that. I think, for example, the downtown master plan, with which I'm familiar, is very, very specific about what block by block by block what the downtown is going to look like. And
well, it doesn't cost us money, is what
it doesn't.
I mean, we're not writing the check for the things. That's right. What I was. She's asking.
Okay.
Given our financial environment, can we pay for it? It's not stuff that we have to pay for.
We pay for that in different ways.
So we can do this without.
We pay
differently.
Yeah.
Oh, so not being as familiar with the downtown plan, I guess when I look at these three that we have, the strategic plan, affordable housing, and then downtown, I understand the value of downtown. However, I think about, and I'm not suggesting we do these, but I think about some of the other ones we have that are around other parts of our city, right? Because we have, our downtown is great and lovely, but there's a lot of people who live in the city who don't utilize our downtown. Mm-hmm. And so I think about, I guess, whenever we get to the point of choosing and committing, I guess my thought is going back to equity, making sure what we're going to spend our time on is something that has a broad impact on making the city livable for people who don't even go downtown, or people who don't own a business, or are shopping at an orchard, or whatever the case is. Not that downtown is not important, but an overall strategic plan for the entire city obviously should impact everyone. Affordable housing is going to impact, I'm assuming, a wide variety of people. Downtown plan also will, but then we have, the West End master plan. And, there's other parts of the city that I would like us to look at in terms of Are those plans one in which we, are satisfied where they are? Do they need revisiting another point? Do we work on strategic plan and affordability subcommittee or whatever that looks like, and then kind of do a broader overall assessment of different plans that touch other parts of the city as well, so that people who live, particularly, like in my ward, they're not saying, well, downtown's great and all, but I want to look at the plan for Howard Street or whatever their other interests are, and they don't feel like that they've just been neglected because they don't live or shop in the downtown.
Good. I hear you.
So of these three that you've got up there in terms of revising the strategic plan, the affordable housing and downtown, I think, they're all to me, they're all important. One of those we don't have at all, right, which is the affordable housing plan. And, I'm sensitive to just the resources that we have and the constraints that we have on our city staff. And if we need, outside assistance to come in and help us with a strategic plan or a downtown, updating a downtown plan, the affordable housing one, right now doesn't have anything there because the council's created a mechanism which money comes in. Also, HUD just came in with good news, slightly increasing the amount of money. So we got a little less than $2 million from HUD, and then with the new development that the council approved at 831, that's another $2.4 million. You got over $4 million there. If some other development comes up that has residential and additional money goes there. I just think people want to understand that the city has a plan to most effectively use that money. And I think that's the concern that, council members and I and other people have. Are we using this money in the most effective way? Because it is a bit frustrating to put $570,000 out there and think, well, provided 3 bedrooms, to two families, even though it's, for 100 years, so to speak, it stays that way. And so the idea of, getting together if it's a subcommittee or it has some alderman involvement, but, some affordable housing experts, some developers, maybe some zoning specialists, some folks that, need affordable housing on a committee, I think demonstrates in a tangible way that we're taking the next step from the campaigns that so many people had here where they talked about affordable housing. Just of those three. In terms of the downtown, plan, my concern about the, development downtown, and I, talked a lot, and I'm out there talking a lot about us being as economically self-sufficient as possible here as a community, and that means having strong economic development as well as, continued development of our community. And despite, that is my position, a lot of people understand that. I don't want to have just necessarily, 10 tall buildings that all have residential in them. I think we should have a mix, down there of commercial and residential. And so, but I'm also sensitive to the market, to the marketplace and the market. I just want to make sure that we continue to have a voice, and I think that's the concern that other people have in the community. And so I don't know if it's possible to have that conversation without getting into a, full-fledged, block by block, review of the downtown plan and what does that mean to the, current proposals that are coming, before us or coming before us and that are going to go into the process. Like, how would this all, operate? Those are just some thoughts that are running through your mind as we're looking at these.
So, 2 pieces to it. One is the affordable housing is a new discussion, but it also has funding. And several of you have commented that it's important that we know and the community knows what our criteria are going to be for spending that money and making sure that it's well leveraged for community benefit and it's equitable. So it's making sure that all parts of the community benefit from this resource that's relatively new for you and may continue to grow. And so how do you want to do that? And then the downtown plan part, that's your biggest plan. Of all the plans that I saw copies of, that's the most extensive. So tackling that's going to probably be a big project.
Well, I agree with Steve and Cicely in terms of the people may not visit our downtown, but it's where the development is coming right now. And so that's actually the way we have the affordable housing fund structured right now. That's going to be the source of our affordable housing. So they're both linked. And so that's where we're seeing kind of stacked up the developments coming towards us without necessarily a plan that we've codified. And so we end up with kind of developers throwing a dart at us a little bit, kind of like, is this going to stick? And that's not a plan. That we're not. Right. So we're not doing things in an organized, orderly way, and so we will end up reacting. But that is also our source of the affordable housing. So it's kind of like we need to have them both going at the same time. We need to have something to do with the money. The best way, as you said, the most effective use of these really important dollars. Then we also need something giving us a little bit more control over what's going to be producing the dollars that are coming in. So I don't know how they're both, as I said, they're both hinged on each other. And so that's why I think the downtown plan is important, because we need to send clear signals to the development community about you can come and develop in Evanston, but this is how we want you to do it. And then if they get muddied signals from us, they won't come. They think it'll cost them too much money. And we don't want that. We want to continue to have economic development and life, but under our terms. So, because then it will continue to generate the dollars we need for the Affordable Housing Fund, which we need to figure out what do we do with that money? What is affordable housing? How do we use it in all the best ways to benefit all of Evanston?
Right, but I guess my point is that I understand economics, I understand that's where we get our money from, but I understand our city's made of people as well. And so I don't want to lose the people in the conversation. So I don't want to just say we're going to do this because that's where our money comes from, or that's because our developers are coming. And that also trickles down to affordable housing, because not everybody in the city needs affordable housing, and not everybody in the city cares about downtown. And so I'm not saying not to do them, I'm just saying let's not forget that the city has people in it. And so I don't want to just be like, we're going to do this because this is where the money comes from.
Well, and I'm not saying to do only one. I'm just saying that's why they're so tightly linked.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to suggest a break, because I have to rearrange the paper up here and that's noisy. I understand that there might be some sort of edibles that will further encourage the conversation. And for those of you who really like chocolate, I brought some chocolate from San Francisco. So if you don't want to sleep at all tonight, there's stuff to help you do that. So let's take a break for about 15 minutes or so.
Okay,
folks. For ease of reference, I put everything on one page, so we didn't have to go back and forth. And your focus so far has been on talking about the strategic plan, the downtown plan, and this concept of affordable housing, which you don't have a plan for, but it seems to fit in a few places on this list. And so let's talk a little bit about what's involved in doing this. And for that, I'd like to ask Wally to talk just a little bit about resource, for internal resource. When you go through a planning process for these types of topics, what do you need?
Let me, before we get into that, maybe I'll just make another pitch on the area of planning, and that I'll just share my concern about short-term planning. That I think the next 18 months operationally are very critical. We've talked about what the state could do, might do, how we react to that. There's a lot of multifaceted things happening in the city, capital planning, all the sustainability, livability work. And I guess I'm concerned, before I talk about the longer range planning, where does the medium range planning fit into this? If the General Assembly cuts LGDF by 10%, that's $800,000. And if that's an impact we have to pick up in the last 6 months of the year, how do we do that? How does that work with the day-to-day work that we're doing? How do we pay for body cameras, which impacts the day-to-day work of the police department? How do we address capital planning needs that have been identified 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago in previous planning processes that haven't been addressed? So I guess my pitch for the first part of your discussion is my concern about where does that 18-month, 2-year window fit into the council's discussions, and then how do we make time to do these sort of plans? Many communities do strategic planning. My recommendation to the council would be, if you want to go down this road, is to look at what other communities that we like to compare ourselves to around the country have done. Most, if not all, use third parties that specialize in this, that come with a whole variety of different kind of public processes to get community input. Those processes can take anywhere from 12 to 24 months, depending on how you do it. And the costs associated with that kind of planning can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars easily. And so then in our financial, where does that fit? Where do we take the money to do that? A downtown plan is probably a smaller version of that. Just to give you an example, we did the work for the North Downtown planning process in-house. That process took, Johanna, the better part of 6 months, maybe, for a relatively small area. I think we had three community meetings associated with that. And so if you look at the full downtown and want to do that in a comprehensive way, reaching out to the entire community, again, probably would recommend we would look at what other communities do. Often we'll hire a third party, and then those costs are certainly in the many tens of thousands of dollars, perhaps not $100,000, but in the, I'd say $50,000 to $75,000 easy to do that. So then you have to have city staff to interface with that. I'm less concerned about that in the community development department. Mostly that would be our planning staff. Strategic plans usually have a broader based staff group, usually from multiple departments. So, my guess is there'd be someone from the city manager's office, someone from community development, because I'd probably 8 or 10 other city staff that are involved pretty regularly in this. Strategic plans also usually have steering committees made up of council members, made up of staff, made up of community members, and those varies in size too. So I think a strategic plan is easily an 18 months, 24 month process once you get started, once you've selected how you want to do it. A downtown plan is probably just a little less than that. I ready to take questions.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Alderman Fisk.
So the major part of the cost is the consultant cost.
And,
so what
the
if
cost
we do
for meetings, I haven't seen invoices from my community recently, but it's mostly staff time. They'll form it, they'll run the meetings, things like that. Could we do stuff like that in-house? Sure. Mm-hmm. My recommendation, if you want to do it right, probably better to look for people who are doing this on a regular basis and have experience and take best practices that they have learned or have seen in other communities.
Okay.
But we could certainly whittle through that.
Yeah.
This is just sort of an off the top of my head, but not a whole lot of.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you. Without going too deep into this, I guess what I would love to do is maybe start with just reviewing the three with the discussion. I have to be honest, I'm probably more familiar with the West End just because it encompasses the 2nd and the 5th Ward. That's what I pay attention to, less familiar with the downtown plan. I will do my homework and go back and read through these, but for those of us that are, I wasn't even on council for 2 of these, it may be worthy of just starting the conversation, Wally, before we take a deep dive into hiring whatever the $100,000 consultant is to redo it and look at it and see if there's something useful as a group that we can discuss. I think for the issue of affordable housing, I hear the two conversations. It's not a matter of starting the conversation brand new, but just, I think, and you campaigned on this, it's how do we expand what we're normally what we're doing, whether it's expanding our zoning restrictions or at least, relaxing our zoning restrictions. And I think that where we're going to be challenged as a community is looking at the larger developments, and that's what I'm experiencing right now in the second ward, versus paying attention to the individual needs of the families, which I think is what you were getting to, which again goes back to expanding the affordable housing. I think those are two things that we can do right away without waiting and spending a lot of money. Just how I feel.
Alderman Rainey?
Well, I think what I would like to do is I would like to refresh my memory with the current strategic plan and the downtown plan, and set aside any effort to begin anew until next year. After all, remember, I know it's hard for us to believe, but this is June 19th, and our fiscal year ends the 31st of December. And we've got so much we don't know about in terms of the state. And maybe make a commitment to consider it more seriously starting the beginning of the year. And just let's get through the next 6 months before we take any major serious steps. I don't think it's an emergency to get started on a downtown plan right now. Wait till
But instead of starting, just
reviewing what we currently have.
Yeah,
We
that's-
might
we're saying
find
the
some
same thing.
fabulous stuff in there that we forget.
Alderman Nguyen?
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I think that given the uncertainty that we're experiencing from Springfield, and the fact that obviously we need to have a discussion about what do we do if this happens, if that happens. So, I don't even think of that as a long-range plan. I think that's something that we need to do as part of the budgeting process, and we do need to start talking about that, because it sounds like we aren't going to get a budget before we have another election, a gubernatorial election. So maybe that's a 2-year discussion, a 2-year planning. Okay, what can they do to us, and then what are our choices if they do that to us? And so obviously, nothing else can happen unless we have the money we can't plan around anything unless we know we have the money for it. So I see the urgency of what you're saying. These other issues are important, but they don't have the immediacy of the financial plan. So, and the choices that we're going to have to make. I do think that coming up with something, I don't mean to say something, but gathering together all of the loose threads that we have floating around about affordable housing, because that's how I feel like it's just a lot of loose threads where we're not even sure what money we can use or what programs we can tie the dollars to, and coming up with some kind of better understanding on the part of the whole council and the community about what are the best practices for the greatest impact for our affordable housing funds, and then how do we, and what's the process by which we get to those? What do we match up with federal dollars? How do we achieve this? And then also saying to ourselves, what's our goal? What are our goals in terms of more multifamily, more senior housing? What is it, the array that we see that we need to have? Because we can't just have all 1 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms, because that doesn't fit the need that we know we have in the community.
Alderman Rainey?
But we don't even know what we're doing about that. So I think we need to have the other discussion first about what's our role in affordable housing.
Well, that too. No, I mean
So,
that.
But on the other issue of the planning effort for the other plans and the financial issue, I know it's all gloom and doom, but I think what we really should see, and I think our staff has been just a little short in the past couple of years, and that is really doing some hardcore projecting on what our revenues are going to be. For example, one of my favorites, as you know, is the real estate transfer tax. How is that looking? What about our permits, building permits, construction permits, those kinds of things? Let's take a real hard look. I think our water is not going to be good this year because it's been raining a lot.
Summer's not over.
Yeah, but so I'd like to really see the other side of the picture. I mean, it might not be all total gloom and doom, although I realize the state is a disaster. So let's see everything, the whole picture, okay?
Can I just follow up
Yeah.
on what you're saying, because you said something that made me think, and it's weird for me to understand what line item, like what federal funds are we waiting on, what state funds are going to be in question, because you're right, we've already received our property taxes. We're going to get revenue from the permits.
And it's supposed to be a 10% increase.
Right.
I read.
Right. So where are those areas of concern that you have?
Sure, and we're getting ready. Our plan is on July the 10th?
Yes.
On July the 10th to do the 6-month report early.
Right.
We already have concerns about a lot of the things Alderman Rainey's just mentioned, that there are building permit projections, which we're questioning at this point based on actual work that's coming. A lot of this is Northwestern driven, and so there's a couple of key projects that we're concerned about at this juncture. A lot of this still is the state. I mean, the local government distributive fund is $8 million. There's been talk of taking 10%, there's been talk of taking 50%. So it's difficult to plan, obviously, in that large stretch of things. I think that, and Marty can speak to this as well, we're starting to see a little bit of a slowdown, and we're starting to be concerned about that. And I think that we don't want to be talking to you about this in October or November. We'd like to be talking to it sooner. So our plan is to come and talk about current year and projections for next year on July the 10th.
I'm sorry.
A slowdown in what?
I think just in the line, Marty's seeing more of the numbers.
Well, what we've been tracking through the first half of the year is the state's projections, working with IML, the Illinois Municipal League, on what they think is going to happen with sales tax, income tax, motor fuel tax. So, we talk about the local government distributed fund, but there's this whole suite of revenues that the state administers on behalf of all cities. And that started about 15 years ago, where we consolidated a bunch of revenue collections with the state. They're still our revenues, but the state administers them. So the projections that were given to us last budget cycle are not as good as the ones that are being estimated now for what would be the state's 17-18 fiscal year. So we're watching it closely. You've heard me say it on a broken record. Thank goodness for our diversification in our revenue base. We don't worry that auto sales have slowed down and we're going to take a huge hit. Schaumburg does worry about that every single time. So, and that's where we focused our development activities on all the small things to make sure they just keep right on coming. But we see it already. The sales tax is below budget. We projected a 2% increase and it's not there. So we will come back at the July 10th meeting and say, here's where we think we're at. On the good side, there's the mild winter was good for savings on expenses as well, and not just public works. So in any event, July 10th, and that will be more of an estimate because we won't have all of our June numbers quite calculated, but we'll have a really good estimate. So I think that will really help the budget process as we go forward.
Alderman Flynn.
So I do like Alderman Rainey's proposal and waiting until we get through the budget part. However, I would want us to make a strong commitment that we are going to do some kind of planning. And I say that because, finishing our campaigns, we all talked about what we wanted to do, we could do it, and heard from a lot of people. And part of what I heard and part of what I experienced as an individual watching council is it was hard to follow where the line of thought was coming from in some decisions. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't at home reading all these plans, but you hear a lot of different voices, and if as a citizen you can't really say, okay, well, the plan is X, and so I can see them trying to get us there, or the plan is X and we're not going to get there because of federal funding cuts or whatever it is, but to have the trust of the community that there is a plan, even if we miss the mark because of things outside of our control or because we changed our mind, but that they know we have a plan that's not just every Monday we sit here and
And that could be a council goal to revisit the plans.
Yeah.
And maybe a case play story. And when I say during the budget season in the past, maybe 3 years ago, we spent a lot of time and staff has responded in a great way with Wally and Marty. We've been really transparent. We've done a lot of meetings on Saturdays, and I think as a result, the public interest is sort of dropped a little bit. Is that a safe way to say it?
Not in my ward.
Well, we have our frequent flyers, let's be honest about that, but I mean, we used to have drop-in crowds, and now the crowds have gotten a little bit smaller, and as a result, I mean, I think we may have canceled maybe 1 or 2 Saturday meetings, and maybe we reconnect or recommit at that time, and we might be able to review one of the strategic plans during that time as a thought.
Yeah. No,
I mean, even to handle it the way that you all did for last year's budget process. So I came in the basement and you could tweet in your questions or whatever. I don't know what we're going to do, but in terms of really looking at that community engagement part, if we say on whatever day we're going to, as a council, revisit the strategic plan on the Saturday, here's the document, you know, tweet in your questions, whatever we wanted to do to try to make sure we're really engaging people in a way. But then there is that 18 to 24 months that we should look at because we are in the state of Illinois and we have some other concerns that other states don't have. And I don't think any of us, well, at least I don't want to commit to hundreds of thousands of dollars for a consultant if we're also saying, you know, we have the property tax increase with the referendum and whatever else people are going to be suffering because of the state budget.
So I think what we hear is we're going to take a look at what we have in place first before we take on any new plans. Is that consistent? That's what I hear.
That's what I'm hearing. Do I
No,
see?
well, I think we
Yeah. No. Yes.
Well, I think we want to start. I mean, I think as Alderman Fleming was saying, we want to let the public know that this is something that we've heard and we're interested in and we are going to be moving ahead on. Not just sort of...
Then in the cloud.
Yeah.
Just in the cloud.
Right, so it's not in the cloud.
So what I'm curious about is, let's say that 5 months from now, the city manager comes to the city council and says, the state cut the local government distributive fund by 25%.
Yikes.
And they reached some grand bargain there, and the governor announced as part of this whole thing that they were going to freeze property taxes, okay, for 2 years or 4 years. You know, by what, you know, principles or, you know, philosophy do you want to make reductions in Evanston? Right. And at this point, like, it needs to be done now, because you can't say, oh, we're just going to generate more revenue without raising taxes and without raising fees.
Right.
So,
that's a question.
so that is, I mean, I don't know, that's a question that I have. So is there a, you know, process and a methodology or an approach or criteria that this council should be developing along those lines, so that that is a lens in which the city manager can make the decisions? Or does it fall to, hey, if that happens, Mr. City Manager, go back there and why don't you come to us and say, how do we, you know, reduce our budget by $4 million or whatever the aggregate amount is?
We do that during the budget season. I mean, he has in the past, the city manager, Marty Upstaff, they come with a proposed budget and then a doomsday plan, meaning if this doesn't happen, then unfortunately he prepares the staff that these are going to be the percentage of cuts. I mean, maybe that's a real simple way of explaining.
Well, no, I mean, and I think one of the challenges we've had is that we haven't had to go to doomsday. Right. And so consequently, as a number of you have mentioned, we've had pretty much ho-hum budget processes. Right. We try to engage the community, but unless we're cutting something or taking something away from people, there's not been, and we're not alone. I mean, other communities all over the country have experienced that. I guess what I'm trying to communicate to you tonight is I just fear that we may be coming to the end of the rope on the state issues, that there's a number of factors that could very well come to bear where they're going to have to do something. And maybe a real fix doesn't come until after the gubernatorial election in 18 months. I'm happy to put together plans, but I also want to make sure those plans are something that's acceptable to you and acceptable to the folks that you represent. And I'm just concerned that that is a time-consuming process, and the sooner there's any kind of direction to me, the better. I mean, it is June, I realize, and you would normally see a budget in October. So there's still a little time. But otherwise, I fear you're going to have a lot of folks coming out in droves because if we're suggesting laying off staff members, there seems to be no interest in raising taxes in Evanston. Many of you have talked about the school tax initiative and people in the community who say, fine, city, now your job is to reduce the taxes the commensurate amount that the schools have raised it. So if there's a real expectation of that,
Make up that gap, right?
if there's a real expectation of that, then where do we even start talking about that?
Right.
So
I'm going to go Alderman Nguyen, then we'll go Alderman Ravel.
Well, I think, Wally, that you're right. We've had that Plan B or the Doomsday Plan for a while, and we haven't had to go to it. And I don't want to say we've gotten complacent because I think we've all felt relief at that. But I think that we should have the type of discussion that you're suggesting, which is, let's assume that we have to go to Plan B. Let's start having the discussion so we don't. Well, we are going to end up with a council chamber that's filled, but why don't we start having the discussion so the community knows that we are planning ahead for this and that what are the choices that we have to make so we can have a discussion as a group, not with as much time pressure, but in advance of let's start thinking a lot about these things and make the best choices that we can. So I think that we should I would like to direct you and the staff to start that process of developing what are the things that could happen at the state, and then what does that leave us with in terms of choices. And Tom, feel free to chime in.
I want to
tell us.
I want to see the 6-month financials. I want to see those.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, with our 6 months, I mean, all of this stuff, I think that we've been fortunate, as you said, that we've always been trending upward while everyone else has been either downward or bouncing along lower. And so we have been lucky here. Not lucky, but
Good.
we have been good. Right. No, we've been working hard here in Evanston, and we are diverse.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much going down the road.
Yeah, okay. So that, I think that is something that's imminent, and we need to deal with it right away.
I'm just wondering, did we ever discuss the Plan B that was in the budget last year? I mean, that might be a starting place to just sort of see how do we...
well, and I think the Plan Bs have become less and less urgent because things have just been more mushy. So I think the Plan B we had for 2017 is as mushy as it was. I mean, there were reductions in some staffing. There were some held open positions. And that's where we would start again. I mean, absent a real specific direction from the council, we'll continue to do what we've tried to do in the past, and that is to, not impact direct city services. So obviously, police, fire, very important. What impacts would there be in public works? What impacts would there be, in other parts? I mean, we're extraordinarily progressive. We do all sorts of things that most communities don't. And so which ones of those things do we stop perhaps doing? Commitment to the environment, commitment to transit, all the things that make Evanston, we've been able to staff up and have staff members focus on those initiatives. Well, they're not answering 911 calls. And so, what kind of balance do we make there in those tough times?
And when we had our Plan B, what percent cut from the state would that have accommodated?
I think there were dollars versus percentages.
We shot for 4%, and we just at about $3.7 million for the 2017 budget, and it was just a little under half of that when we did this for the 2016 budget. That was the first year of no budget, and everybody was totally worried that this was going to cost it. And those we worked really, just put a fine point on it. We really went through the first Plan B well and said we could do without this. If we had to, this would be a cut we could live with. And then last year, it was a bigger amount that we didn't say, are you sure, Chief, you can do without this? It was more, everyone identified all of their 4% decreases, and that's what we'll have to do.
Because we really haven't known what number to shoot for. I mean, that's been the challenge the last few years, and I haven't wanted to scare the community, scare the staff to say, here are real things that are going to be cut, because, it is the classic crying wolf in the crowded theater, because then when it's really time, So we've just been trying to be balanced with that. So we would go back through what the council has seen the last several years.
But part of it is you don't necessarily get direction, or have you gotten direction from the council, like just use your discretion to decide what to cut, or our direction is, sort of an across the board. In the past, have you gotten?
I think the council has said that they want to continue to offer services at the same levels as to the greatest extent possible.
Right.
So the strategy has been to get the number from across the board cut, but not say every department, police chief, fire chief, public works director, you're all doing 4. It's just, here's the aggregate number.
Yeah, everyone had to come up with their 4%, and then I thought at some point we might have to choose among them.
Okay. So Alderman Fleming and then Alderman Fisk.
So your point about that whole thing, where the cuts come from and all that, and what philosophy are we using to dictate that? And I appreciate you all saying, we did 4% across, or that the council said, keep our services high and cut other stuff. But I'm going to go on a limb and say we were all elected to make these decisions.
Right.
And while I value Wally and Marty's decision, and obviously they're the experts, Marty, with the numbers and such, I do feel myself that it's my job as a council to give some direction for that. And obviously I fall heavy on the side of equity, and I know that some municipalities use, equity matrix or whatever to gauge how they are going to cut things. Now, it's not set in stone, so there's some liberties there, but I would like, I guess, to give more input on how that direction is received, whether we decide it's, keep all services and cut other stuff, whether it's, whatever that is, right? I think a lot about the people, and so I want to keep the cuts away from the people, but also thinking again in the greater state of Illinois and people who, are maybe being impacted in other ways by our state budget, that I want to make sure as a city that I'm making sure they're attended to, because they're already kind of been cut by the state, and so I hate for us as Evanston to be cutting them as well. And so that's how I would like to direct the city manager when he's looking at cuts to do that. Because I know even last year when I sat through the budget process, I was like, well, how come the police kind of, I think at one point, could spend money and then other agencies couldn't. And obviously it's on your perception. I don't use the police very often, so I, in my mind, was like, well, I can cut some police and I'd like to keep the forestry department or whatever it is important to me, but that's not the way in which I want all of our decisions to be made. I like to think about the people who we're serving and making sure they can stay in Evanston. We know the referendum's coming, and a lot of people between that and whatever else they're experiencing from the state are going to be in a hard way. And so I hate for us to think about, for me as a council member, to not think about those people and give more direction to Wally and Marty instead of just, you pick and then I'll choose from whatever list you give me. I would love to give them more direction in terms of based on our goals, based on our priorities as a council, based on what we've heard, and then make our cuts kind of representative of the people we represent, of the citizens who voted for us.
Let's go to a quick, and then we'll go.
We go through that. So each city council member, as they present the budget, we have one-on-one opportunities, sometimes two-on-one, to go through that process with it. So we do participate throughout the whole. It's not like they come with a book and it's a bag of surprises.
No, I just heard him say they do 4% and keep whatever. So obviously, as a citizen last year, my participation was different.
That's the guidelines, but you're definitely.
But it was a 4%, the cash value of 4%. Right. So it wasn't 4% across the board.
Right.
It was getting to that cash value and then making decisions based on a variety of factors.
And what Alderman Braithwaite was referring to is, even before that 4% was done, we had one-on-one meetings with the aldermen to go through what they were looking at as far as the coming budget. And we have varied that a lot over this last 6 to 7 years, whether we did community first, then aldermen, staff first, then community, then aldermen. We've switched it up quite a bit to try and keep engagement.
Yeah, so that's good to know, because I only had the one part as a citizen last year, so that's all I experienced.
Alderman.
Okay, back to the doomsday scenario. I agree with Alderman Nguyen. I mean, this really has to be community-based, and I think the earlier we bring them into it, the better. And perhaps at the end we'll only have good news, as we've had, in the recent past. I want to preface that by saying, You guys have done a great job with the budget. I mean, you really have, and we've had a process that was different than the process before, so it's been much more inclusive. I wouldn't read the fact that people aren't coming to the meetings as any disinterest. I think that people have felt that they were engaged, and I think they've been very positive about the process. But in the doomsday scenario, I think the very first thing that's important is for us to get out in front of it early and establish priorities. And the priorities, again, are the basic ones. I mean, it's police and fire and infrastructure and garbage collection, health, and then work from there on out. But it's up to the council to establish what those first priorities are. And we have discussed that over the past. I mean, I don't think that's a big mystery. But my experience with the community has always been that when you reach out to them, they will put their arms around it and get involved in helping to find solutions, rather than feeling that we're a group of 10 people who are just telling them what to do or what to cut. And there are going to be some hard choices, but those hard choices are better made together than they are us trying to do that ourselves.
And I think those hard choices need to be made in light of, because people ask this question, that we are, as a city, running as efficiently, as possible, that we've implemented, as many new innovations in technology and things like that, so that, I think we need to be able to demonstrate that to them. Otherwise, people quickly think, oh, yeah, you can quickly cut stuff because there's a whole bunch of fat here.
I don't say that anymore.
Yeah.
They used to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they did.
Mm-hmm. What else I have is I need you to start setting some timelines, and if I could make some suggestions based on what you heard, I'd like to do that. You have the overall financial picture coming on July 10th. And so I think at that point, you're going to want to engage yourselves, and you need to decide when the community gets engaged on the financial issues, and discuss all of the questions that you raised. How much does the community know already? What do they need to know about the choices that you're going to make? You're absolutely right. The city manager and your chief financial officer can come to you with the array of things that they think, but it's much more helpful to them and to the community to know that you're the ones that have laid out the criteria, the performance criteria that you want out of this budget, as good or as bad as it is. And so that they can help you get to where you need to know and be ready to make the explanations that the community is going to want. Evanston is full of very smart, very savvy, very connected people. They certainly know that there's a problem going on in the state of Illinois. So that underlying basis is already there. And there is a certain amount of assurance in community members knowing that you're on top of it, that you have thought about this, that you have a picture in your mind that you can share with your community members about what the priorities are and how you're going to make these decisions. And if they're really significant cuts or changes, then you want to have your explanations well in hand. You want to hear what people have to say about the impacts. You'll probably change your minds on some things, depending on what you hear. But the fact that you have a strategy in place and you're doing it now before the hit comes, this is a tradition that Evanston has taken on in previous years. Even when you weren't sure at all that anything was going to happen, you had a doomsday plan, just in case. And that's good strategic thinking. And that tells your community that you're laying the basis for whatever is coming for them. So it struck me that July 10th is kind of the start point for you for that, and one of the things that you could do from that point on is lay out your next steps in the process. What do you want to do after you learn whatever you're going to learn on July 1st? Do you want to schedule some meetings to start to map out what your decision process is on the financial issues? Do you want to map out some meetings where you start to say, here's where we need to start having the community meetings, when and where, and how much time is this going to take, and what resources are we going to need to provide these explanations? As you get ready for your budget, which is, you're getting an early mid-year report, but you still have your budget plan to do too, no matter what happens at the state. So you've got a lot you can accomplish in the next 6 months on this particular topic. And I think your city manager has clearly stated that this is one of his priorities for asking you to help him move this forward. So that's what I heard. The criteria, what are you going to use? One of the pieces of information that the city manager sent out was in 2012, there was a performance-based budgeting, priority-based budgeting process. And that's probably worth a look just to remind you what the criteria you used at that point and whether or not those are still relevant. There's all sorts of ways that you can approach budgeting and financial planning, and Marty knows them all. So you might want to take a look at what your choices are for setting those criteria, but I think the criteria are important too. So these two here at the bottom of the page sound to me like are going to occupy your available discretionary time for the next 6 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
So, and these two are tied with this one, the short-term and the medium financial planning. The other two are the review of existing plans. So as you go forward into the probably the medium-term future, and understanding what affordable housing funds and Evanston's role, I think those are important too. And this sounds to me like a very comprehensive work plan for the next year to 18 months without even tackling a particular plan that you've had historically. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you could define for yourselves collectively and document what affordable housing or affordability means to the collective council, I think that would be a huge step forward. Mm-hmm. And then what could fall out of that when you get to that point is you've got some resource to deliver to affordable housing affordability. Again, what are the criteria that you're going to want to use in the future? When people know that you have money, they will come to you with all sorts of fun and wonderful and exciting and interesting things to do with that money. If you don't have your plan laid out, it may not be spent the way that you want it to be spent looking back. But if you lay your criteria out at the beginning, you've got your choices. You could say, hey, that's a great idea. If you could bring us some resource, it might be a little higher up on the priority listing. But for right now, the council's already set these priorities for affordable housing. It's going to be spread across all these wards, and so bring us something in this ward and bring some resources with you, by the way, and we'll be happy to talk to you. Mm-hmm. So if you, that definition and that criteria would be a huge step in helping you move forward on the affordability issue. And then the review of existing plans, my suggestion there is fit that in where you can on your council meetings. You have a number of them. One of the things that you could do is identify which ones you want to look at first, second, and third, and then ask staff if you can figure out how we can schedule those in over time, depending on your availability at regular council meetings or special meetings, to just review what it is you have and what you've accomplished so far and what's might not be important to try and accomplish now. Does that make sense?
Can I ask some operational questions? So, on the affordable housing, do you see that as maybe a special council meeting, kind of presenting to you some of the information that we have? Do you see that more as a community dialogue? Do you see it as something like this, around the table, or something like in the council chambers? Any thoughts on what a next step of that looks like?
Around the table.
Around this table? Okay.
Yep. I'd say community dialogue. Around the table.
Around the table, at least to get us all on the same level of understanding before we invite in the community.
Okay.
Well, the community can be here.
I mean,
yeah.
So I think we would have, Alderman Simmons was asking, we've got very talented city staff that can talk about what we do, how we do it, what our partners have been, how we've spent the money, and then have discussions, once the foundation is laid. So we can schedule an evening just to talk about that, and then either have a community dialogue based on that discussion afterwards, or where that would fit. On the existing plans, so I think Gene is suggesting perhaps 3. It would seem like the strategic plan and the downtown plan are no-brainers based on your discussions. What would a 3rd or 4th plan be?
West End.
I like West End.
West End is a 3rd. Is there a 4th, or just leave it at those 3?
Start with those 3.
So we can come, we've got a previous referral on the downtown plan, so we're going to come and do a general overview of that. Then maybe we wait and look at that through the lens of tonight's discussion, just to make sure that I think it was actually going to try to go in a little bit different direction. So I think maybe we will not do that on the 26th, but we'll refashion it for another discussion. So put those as part of a regular council meeting, or double up on a 3rd Monday kind of thing. Does that make sense?
No, we could do on a 3rd Monday. Couldn't we do like a council meeting with Planning and Development Committee doing the downtown plan?
Whatever you like.
Pardon me, and the Human Services Committee presentation, do the parks scorecard if you wanted to include that. Do it that way with the committees, having it presented as committees or something?
To the council, standing committees?
Yeah.
If that's what the group
But
wants.
I think adding these kinds of important things to regular council meetings, it's just too much. It's just too much.
But so even if the standing committee do it on a 3rd Monday?
A 3rd Monday.
Okay, all right. So we can do that. So we'll work on a schedule for that.
But they'd just be reviewing the current plans, not going into the new stuff.
That's right. And if there were projects or initiatives that came from those plans, giving the details of how they worked and how much money was spent, the time frames for that. So then I guess the last question with financial planning, will come out the 10th of July with more issues there, is sort of programmatic goal setting. So the council, I think the last time the council rearranged its goals significantly was the last time Gene was with us, and that was the better part of 3 years ago. And so the councils have basically just carried forward the council goals that we've had. Are you comfortable doing that again, one more year? Would you want to have a session, again, kind of putting the budget aside for a second and just thinking about programmatic issues? Or are we at a point where that doesn't make sense?
Well, I think it makes sense after we go through what you just laid out.
Okay. So the challenge with that is the budget. So we've tried to, have the council come to some agreement on programmatic goals prior to a budget, because if you say we're not happy with parks and we want to forget about streets and just do parks in the CIP, that's good to know sooner than later. Or, I've mentioned body cameras before. That's a multiple $100,000 initiative which we don't have budget for. So if the council says that kind of transparency in the police department is a goal for 18, then we're going to have to start thinking about what do we cut just to get body cameras, for example. And that's, I think, the biggest operational piece out there that we've talked about internally I'm not missing any, am I?
You mentioned it, operationally, that's the biggest one, because the CIP crown will hit next year.
Right. And so I think that's largely well on its way as far as decision-making goes.
I would like to do goals. I mean, I defer. You all have done them already with Jean. There's several people who are new who have not done them.
Right.
And I don't know how well, even you did them last time, I don't know if you felt like they were implemented well, if they were, if anyone was even keeping track of they, I don't know how that went. And so I would like to do them because I'm new, and so I'd like to go through that process, because then I'd like to have that as a direction for some bigger decisions that we're making. That's my thought.
You might find that some amending of the goals would be in order.
Yeah.
But, just take a look at them and we'll.
But I don't know if we could, I might find that there's some amending, but I think that would be a conversation that, I would assume that would be a conversation that other people want to have as well.
Yeah, you're looking for a forum to discuss, it. Once you.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
So we've tried to do it, looking at your calendar and the other things you just agreed to. If we could try to maybe do that at the beginning of September, because really right now you have scheduled a meeting on June 26th, 2 meetings in July, and 1 meeting in August. And so unless the council is prepared to take on additional July and August meetings, which historically the council has not done, that we would try to then, I think, be aggressive in September, at least with a goal-setting meeting. I think some of this other stuff we would accomplish sooner than that, but we could come up with a calendar that made sense. So that by the budget, which is normally out the end of the second week of October, even if we push that a week or two, the council has had a very responsible budget process the last few years, and that being done before Thanksgiving is something that most of your colleague communities on a calendar year, fiscal year do not accomplish. So you beat them usually by a good 3 weeks.
And we'd do the baseline and get all that set waiting for, so this can work, waiting for the goal adjustments.
Right.
And then if we use the same process with the balancing worksheet to include changes in goals, I think we'd have a nice mix.
Sure. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All I would ask is on the, when we have the discussion about affordable housing, that it be a really structured, I prefer a really structured conversation in terms of even beforehand, like here are the questions, that we're going to go through and that we want people to have thought about before and come ready to talk about those specific things so we understand what everybody's opinion is and we can agree on a path forward hopefully after
So is that something you'd like to see happen before August or before August recess?
For me personally, the biggest thing I think that's out there is sort of the status quo right now is the way we're doing things with the HUD money. The new element to this whole thing is when we start to get money that comes in through the inclusionary housing. And so I think a lot of this may be driven potentially by when does that money come into the pot? And that could help with the timeline of all of this. I'm not sure.
And I think in addition to that, though, many of you have talked about looking at other policies. There are land use policies that drive a lot of this that aren't really dollar and cents related.
Right.
So which we would want to put on the table as well. Obviously, I don't think anyone's expecting that we're going to solve all these problems in one meeting. But I think that in addition to the dollar issues, it would be nice to at least get a sense from the council where the land use issues are, and if that's something you want to do in 6 months, 12 months, beyond, something like that. So why don't you let us spend a little time with a calendar, and maybe we'll do some polling of what the majority of folks are not available after the 24th. There's a 5th Monday in July, for example. Maybe we'll try to do something then. But we'll do some polling. Again, I'll be honest that the council has generally not been available in that period because of rescheduled vacations and stuff. So it's no killer to anyone. That's just the fact of most scheduling. Okay, so Mr. Mayor, members of the council will look to having an item on the July 10th agenda that kind of is an overview of these issues with some proposed schedules and calendar dates that would take us through the balance of the fall. I think deal with the financial planning, talking to Alderman Suffredin earlier today, I think as we sit here this evening, things are still way up in the air. They could fall to the ground at any moment, or stay way up in the air for the foreseeable future. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say that we're 11 days from further clarity.
Yeah.
I wouldn't count on something amazing.
Hey,
Yeah, buy their Powerball tickets. That could be the tipping point finally, when there's no more Powerball in Illinois.
But Tom, but a question related to that, because it directly impacts us, is do we have any visibility whether they're going to get an amendment passed to allow for federal funding to continue to be spent on projects after July 1st, or whether those are going to come to a halt?
I'll poke around. I mean, there's.
Right? I mean,
I'm sorry to give you that answer.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But just I want to make sure everybody's, that's on people's minds, because that's the last thing that I saw is the concern that if they don't get something passed, it's going to be like last year where work stopped on that Ridge Emerson project.
And we've already, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, received direction. I shared with an email just before this meeting started from IDOT that we need to get the project wrapped up. So the contractor and the city and IDOT have met and have come up with a plan that will get us about a week's further into the project, and then we're going to have to stop. So work will stop likely sometime the latter part of this week, maybe the first part of next week. So it'll be several days before the 30th, and the Sheridan Road project will be stopped. So.
Wally, what about the Howard Street project?
My understanding is the only one that's impacted by this is the Sheridan Road project, because that one is being, was let by IDOT. All the other projects, where there may be some pass-through money, are our projects.
Could you just tell me where that's going to stop? I don't mean to.
What the email said this evening was that we're prepared to do some preliminaries. We're gonna. I think there's some trees that need to be removed. Those will come down. There'll be some signage that's done.
Let's not. If we're not doing let's please not do that. Let's not make it. Let's not start demoing and then have the project halt.
Well, I mean, this is something less that we're not going to be digging up any streets, because there's no way that we could do that.
Okay, but it's going to be awful if we take down the trees and then Sheridan Road just sits there.
And the reality is that it won't. But it will.
But let's please think about that. I'm sorry, everyone, to take your time up with that, but
sure,
it would look just so depressing.
Okay, I'll talk with Public Works tomorrow.
All right, Jean, is there anything else that you have for us?
Just to sum up for you, what I heard you're going to do is June 19th, and on July 10th, you are going to start the process that's outlined up here. So your first priority, based on what I've heard from you, is your financial picture. So learn where you are on July 10th. And also on July 10th, you're going to get a calendar from staff showing you the options for addressing the other issues, which includes goals update and possible amendments to the existing goals in advance of your budget planning process, and so, or in quick conjunction with your budget planning process. So finances, goals, and then understanding the affordable housing issue. The mayor has suggested a structured conversation at around the table to start, and to lay out how you're going to approach defining it, and then all of the adjacent elements, including the conversations with the public. And then the last piece is reviewing the existing plans. It will be the strategic plan, the downtown plan, and the west side plan. So those are the three. That's plenty of work to do to start, and those are also among your older plans. So that would be a good approach, and that is going to fully occupy your next 6 to probably 12 months, and this is in addition to your routine business. So you have set yourself a very ambitious agenda, and there's no reason to think you can't accomplish it. Just pace yourselves and give yourselves a break on occasion and don't punish yourself if things don't go quite the way that you expect. So just experience advice. So you have done a wonderful job tonight, masterful job, and I think you ought to give yourselves a round of applause and go home and get some sleep. It's my pleasure to work.
Thank you, Jean, for coming all the way out here and facilitating the session. Thank you, everybody, all the residents, for coming and making some remarks at the beginning and listening. And thanks to the media for covering this for other folks here in Evanston. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Second? All right, I guess everybody. I sound like everybody. All right, we're adjourned.